Hi everyone, and welcome to this video. We're going to be working on creating a bass. So if you remember from the last video, we have this kick loop, and what I've done is I've just added some extra effects just to dial it down a little bit and beef it up. So what I've also done is added these percussion loops here, just thrown in a few samples just for context when we put the bass in place. There's nothing special going on there. And we're now going to add a bass part. So just create this new MIDI track and call it the bass. And then all we're going to do is find a suitable sound that we could use for the bass. So I'm just going to have a listen through, and bear in mind for the kick drum we used a ambient sustained sound. So I'll try not to use anything that's sustaining too much. Maybe go with something that's got a bit of transient information, but we're still going to want to have a bit of low end in there which we can turn into a decent bass sound, which is still going to test our sound design and sampling abilities. So I think we'll go with this dull thumps. So I'm going to drag this over to our newly created bass track, and then once I've got that there, all I'm going to do is add our metering plugins that we used in the last video. So we're going to load up a instance of voxengo span and smexoscope. So I'm going to start off by hitting a few notes and seeing how it sounds. What we could also do is change that to a sampler as well, just to give us a bit more control. So I'll just play a few notes, and it sounds like we're not quite on that transient. So what we can do is zoom in, and we can edit the sample start point. And because of the nature of this bass, I want a sustained type bass. Then once we've got our start point where we want it within this sound, we can press this sustain mode here, and this is going to set a loop. So we'll also take snap off as well, which is going to allow us to be a little bit more accurate as well. And now it's just a case of setting the loop brace as specific or as tight as we want. So what I'm going to do is now just try and set that so we've got a real nice tight sustaining loop. So I need to move the actual loop itself, and we've also got our start and end markers as well. So in this case, I've just gone right the way into the waveform, and we've got a cycle here. Now that I've got the rough cycle, then what I can do is try and make it a little bit less clicky by using the crossfade parameter within the sampler. And that's just gonna, as the name suggests, it's just rounding off the edges and make it a bit more smooth. Let's just zoom right in and have a look. We'll just play back the notes and we'll hear that click reduce. So that sounds quite good to me. We've got quite a nice tone coming through for this bass that we can work on. The only problem we have is it's not currently sustaining. So if I go and push up the sustain in the filter global tab, then we get that nice sustained bass that we can work with. And then once we've done that, we can maybe think about pitching it and finding out what frequency it's lying on or what note it lies on. So we'll go to our spectrum analyzer, change it to low frequency inspection mode so we can get a better idea, and we can see it's about 100 Hertz there on that note. And we can use the transposition, and then we could also just play in the notes using a clip. And if we wanted to go one further, we could turn this into a polyphonic bass and maybe play a fifth above or an octave, or maybe just play a chord and then see how that sounds as a chord style bass that underpins the rest of the track. So I'm liking that A that we've got. We'll add in this D, and then we'll add another A an octave higher, and that should give us a nice rich chord tone now. That'll make a nice bass when we filter it down, and gives us some modulation options as well. So we've got the basic sound down. What I'm going to do is just real quick program a bit of a progression or a bit of a MIDI pattern that we can use as our bass. And I want to do quite a soothing or relaxing bass. It's not going to be like a groovy tech house bass or anything like that. So I'm just going to lay out some chords. Okay, so I'm just throwing a few MIDI notes around here. There's no real skill or theory going into what I'm doing. Just trying to get something that works. And that's sounding okay to me. So what I might do now is just add a saturator just to push these levels a little bit and warm it up slightly. Just a little bit. And once we've done that, we now need to get this sounding a little bit less of a chord and more of a bass. So obviously we need to go straight to the filtering, and we could add a auto filter, but in this case I'm just going to do this using the filter built into the sampler. Pull that down to around 200 Hertz or so, 300 Hertz. And if we want, we can give that a little bit of resonance and maybe drive as well. So I think that sounds nice, but it's going to get a bit stale if we're just opening and closing the cutoff throughout a track. So I'm going to add a little bit of movement using the LFO. And we could do this to something like the level, but in this case I'm going to do it to the filter because we've already got the filter turned on. And I know that if I set this to around 3 Hz, it's going to give the vibe that I'm after. Things to be aware of if you're going to be modulating things like the filter cutoff or any sort of resonance is that you're going to get jumps in level. So what you can do afterwards is place a compressor on the channel, and what this is going to do is just flatten out the signal a little bit because we want a nice and sustained bass. It's still going to have that movement from the filter, but it just evens out the level of the signal. And this one doesn't need it a great deal, but I'm just going to add a tiny bit of compression. And the job of that is literally just to even out the signal a little bit, and then we can boost the makeup gain slightly to compensate. Now that that's in place, we'll do another round of compression, but this time it's more of a mixing type of compression, and that sidechain compression just to move it ever so slightly out of the way of the kick. So standard sidechain settings, we'll check the kick drum in the sidechain window, fast attack, look ahead, and then set the release to taste. And we can see in this window here how the release is affecting the signal. And I'm just going to set the output gain back to 0 because this is sidechain compression and it's not going to require any makeup gain. Okay, so listening to that with the kick, I think it does need a little bit more gain or a bit more weight, so I'm just going to add a utility device and push that up slightly. Just avoids me having to do it on the channel fader, which is already set to 0 or unity. And once we've done that, I'm just going to have a little mess around and maybe add some filter cutoff or sort of filter envelope to the cutoff just to give it a bit of a pluck and see if that improves the sound whatsoever. Remember, it's all about experimentation here, so there are no limits and you can do whatever you want to do. So I think that might actually work quite nicely in a higher octave. So it sounds quite nice, but I'm not going to be using it within this track. So what I'm going to do now is speed things up a little bit so you're not seeing the same techniques over again. And all I'm going to do is add a little bit of saturation, delay and reverb. And then once I've done that and got those effects in place just to help it bed into a track, we'll really quickly pop into the arrangement view. And I'm just going to show you what it sounds like when we put it within the arrangement view and how we'd automate this in a real track context. Okay, so if we go into the arrangement now, I'm just going to drag these chords out all the way across. And what I've got is I've got the basis of the drums down with an EQ3, which has had some filter automation put on it, just so we've got a breakdown where the kick drops out. And all we're going to do is automate the filter cutoff to give us a little bit of motion and a little bit of tension and release. So we can build this up just by drawing in some nodes. As you can see here, I can just put up and straight away we've got that expression, and combined with the LFO or the filter modulation through the LFO on the sampler, you can hear it's quite a powerful sound from something that started off just as a dull thump that I recorded in my corridor of my house. So I'll just let this play through to the end, but that's the end of this video, and in the next one we're going to have a brief look at doing some high percussion and also layering up some of our samples which aren't found sound. So I'll see you in the next video.